When you make your entire army out of clones, there are a lot of interesting things that can happen.
Nara?
Now, I'm Waxer. He's Boyle.
Nara.
For one, you can technically carry out one of the largest twin experiments in human history. Twin experiments are research studies that utilize identical twins because of their matching DNA. One twin is used as a control group and the other twin is subjected to a stimulus that is what the research is looking at. NASA recently did a twin study to see the effects of long-term space travel on the human body. They used the Kelly brothers, astronauts Scott and Mark. Mark would stay on Earth for about a year and Scott would be in space during that time. This is how NASA was inadvertently able to find out that every month in space leads to around 2 millimeters of penile growth. Growth that actually does not revert itself when the astronaut returns back to Earth. And if you take a look at these pictures of Scott Kelly when he returns back to Earth, he's extremely happy about it. Anyway, because the clones are all identical, we can assume that all the changes we see occurring to them are deviations caused by the environment and experiences they are exposed to. And so while clones don't have dress uniforms adorned with service ribbons, they do seem to instead wear their battlefield experience through the various modifications they make to their armor, helmets, even hair and skin. Do you guys remember that first episode of The Bad Batch where Wrecker and Omega pick a fight with almost everyone in the cafeteria? Well, the basic clones look like this. They have a standard military-style flat top grown out a bit more on the sides with that Jango Fett widow's peak. And so any deviations from this standard look, we're going to assume is service-related. Let's take a look. First, we have Commander Cody, CC-2224. He is a by-the-books, no-nonsense clone officer.
General Kenobi.
Commander Cody.
The siege goes well. With our continued barrage, their shields should be down in 3 months.
But we've been here a month already.
Yes, sir. We're right on schedule.
In the same way, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a by-the-books Jedi General. The two were really a perfect pairing for the Republic propaganda posters, until Cody sicked that ATTE on Kenobi. But the point is, Commander Cody is one of the clones who would go on to keep his military flat top all throughout the war. It never really changes it at all. The military flat top is one of the harder cuts to maintain, especially on deployment. It also represents the precision, dependability, and aggression you want in a combat officer. This is a tactical haircut that makes your head look like a desirable jar shape. And judging by that gnarly scar that Cody has on his face, he's had some near-death experiences with some wild animal claws or vibroblades. That probably has made him even more disciplined and appreciative of proper planning before a mission. But just like Kenobi, Commander Cody, like kind of rhyme, is not afraid of stepping outside the box once the conventional way fails. This is why Commander Cody has a close connection to Clone Force 99 and saw value in them, something that most of the regular clones did not. Commander Cody's helmet and armor have multiple antennas on them, which shows us that communication is extremely important for someone in his position. Captain Rex in many ways is the most important clone in Star Wars, and so he needs to be a bit special in both his appearance and personality.
Both of you showed valor out there. Real courage. Remind me of me, actually.
When the Clone Wars came out in 2008, the blonde buzz cut, especially the dyed or bleached blonde buzz cut, was an extremely popular look, and it all comes from one individual, Slim Shady, the unhinged and completely uncontrollable alter ego of Marshall Mathers. I remember in the early 2000s, there was always that one kid with the bleached buzz cut, and you never messed with them because they kind of had nothing to lose and were always looking to fight everyone. In a lot of ways, that's exactly the type of person Jango Fett was. And Filoni has stated that Rex is more like Jango Fett than most of the clones, hence the Slim Shady look. As a matter of fact, when Captain Rex was created, he was created as a replacement for the original Legends clone named Alpha 17. Alpha 17 was supposed to be the main clone in the Clone Wars TV series, but Lucas cut Alpha because there were already too many A-sounding names in the series, like Ahsoka and Anakin. And let me tell you something, Alpha 17, he was even more like Jango Fett. He was completely unhinged and loved killing things just way too much. Now, Captain Rex is far more disciplined and loyal than someone like Alpha 17. When Rex runs into the deserter Cut Laquin, he almost turns the guy in like some goody two-shoes. But Captain Rex was also paired with Anakin Skywalker, one of the most passionate and aggressive Jedi generals of the war. He loved the clones and would treat them like brothers. And don't for one second think that that kind of compassion didn't change Captain Rex and made him more aware of his decisions. It's also probably made him more capable of thinking outside the box.
Droid attack flare. thought.
And as the war progresses, we see Captain Rex become less by the books and more independent, like his progenitor, Django. He would later lead the 501st in a mutiny against Ponkrell. He would also fight the effects of the inhibitor chips during Order 66, and even when he could have just walked away from everything after Order 66, he starts to clone Underground. And that's because the bleached blonde buzz cut doesn't just represent unhinged criminal behavior, it also represents resistance and counterculture. Which is why from day one, they were telling us that Captain Rex was going to rebel. On an interesting side note, Rex's helmet also has a pair of J guys on it, a Mandalorian symbol for honor, which could point to the fact that he encountered some Mandalorian trainers from the Koval Dar on Kamino. Now, we just mentioned Laquin. He's a very unique clone because he managed to leave the service pretty early on and live a relatively normal civilian life with a family. He has reddish-brown hair that's worn longer than most military regulations will allow, and he also has mutton chops. But more importantly, poor Laquin has a receding hairline that I honestly have never seen on anyone as young as him. Remember, these clones at most are like 19 or 20 years old here. Most clones don't have hairlines like Laquin, which means it's very possible that this hair loss is not caused by genetics, but from stress. We know, for one, that Cut didn't actually desert on purpose. What actually happened was the troop transport that he was on was shot down by Separatist gunships, and then once the ship crashed, those gunships started killing everyone who had survived, and so Laquin just kind of hightailed it out of there. But instead of finding his way back to the JR, Cut would find Sue Laquin on Selakamaya and fall in love with her, starting a family. And so the extreme hair loss could come from surviving that really horrible battlefield situation, but it could also be attributed to becoming a dad and having children.
Oh, let's take a look here.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get the ball. I didn't know.
You're safe. That's all that matters.
Laquin's heart might be full, but his hair is beginning to desert him, just like how he deserted the Grand Army of the Republic. Have you guys noticed how much better the character models are in the Bad Batch? I mean, it's not just scruffy Vice Admiral Rampart that looks good. Everyone looks good with a beard. What about Captain Hauser, the clone officer most likely to appear on the cover of GQ magazine? I mean, look at this voluminous slick back salt and pepper hairstyle he's got. Sure, the guy's probably only in his early 20s, but years of stress and hardship have weathered this clone into a perfect specimen. He is an alpha male. He is both deadly and scaled in combat, but also courageous and kind. Captain Hauser is the man that all men look up to, and he's the man that all men want to be. Captain Hauser is even willing to put his career and life on the line for the Twi'lek people he's supposed to be suppressing.
Look around you. We're now being ordered to target the very people we swore to protect, and I will not be a part of it any longer.
In a lot of ways, Captain Hauser is way too clean-cut and ethical. He's kind of like Ned Stark, a man amongst men, but a bit out of his depth when it comes to dealing with snakes. Let's just hope his tendency to do what's right at all times doesn't lead to a premature death. Commander Wolf CC-3636 is a highly dependable clone, leader of the 105th Battalion, also known as the Wolfpack. Wolf would serve bravely all throughout the Clone Wars alongside Plo Koon. Sometime during the Clone Wars, Wolf would lose his eye while fighting against Asajj Ventress, giving him his famous badass look. And it would really suit his personality quite well. Commander Wolf was a no-nonsense clone just like Cody, and like most of the Commander clones, he has that flat-top military cut. The loss of an eye makes him look even more intimidating, especially when you consider that Wolf, despite looking like the other clones, was always a bit more serious when it came to his facial expression. Perhaps that's due to the ever-present scowl on his face. Commander Wolf had to go through some really hairy situations early on in the war. I mean, it was tough for all the clones early on in the war when no one knew what was going on. Commander Wolf was one of the only survivors of an attack by the Separatist superweapon known as the Malevolence. He and Plo Koon and a handful of troopers were trapped in an escape pod and were about to be vented into space by some Separatist droids, but were saved at the last minute. I guess you could say that Commander Wolf has always had an extreme focus on the mission at hand. And now with just one eye, it's clear that focus is even more concentrated. We see this in the Bad Batch as well when he's leading a mission for the Empire. When you send the Wolf in, he doesn't ask any questions, he doesn't fool around, he just gets the job done. You don't mess with the Wolf. Years later, when Wolf is living with Captain Rex and Gregor in retirement, he even relapses to his Imperial indoctrination when he informs the Empire that they have Jedi on board with him. Ultimately, Wolf is a good guy. I mean, he puts the clones before the Empire, which is fine by me. But as you can see, he is a very highly focused and conditioned individual.
Recover their fallen. Then we move out. But, they're traitors. Perhaps. But they're clones. We owe them that.
CC-557639, Gregor is a clone commando, and he's one of the only clones that we know that has sustained a traumatic brain injury. Well, actually, there's also what happened to Echo and Wrecker. And I'm pretty sure, given the nature of the clone trooper's job, that a lot of the clones are getting traumatic brain injuries. But Gregor, his brain is special. You see, during the Clone Wars, he got so messed up during a transport crash on Abafar, he completely forgot who he was and was essentially exploited by a Sullustan who needed a dishwasher in his restaurant. Luckily, Gregor was discovered by a Republic unit who reminded Gregor of who he actually was, which resulted in Gregor getting into a massive firefight with a local separatist garrison, causing a huge Rhydonium explosion and engulfed the entire outpost. Gregor also survived that incident, but he suffered even more brain injuries. And if you take a look at the man and his eyes, the expression on his face, you can tell he's a bit loopy, but in the best way possible. You know, Gregor doesn't have memory issues. He doesn't get dark and depressive because of that. He doesn't have mood swings all the time that leads to violent outbursts. His traumatic brain injury just makes him kind of happy-and-go-lucky. Gregor is genuinely a nice person to be around, and he defected from the Empire all by himself, and I have to give him props for that. And so while some people might see a loopy-looking reject of a clone when we take a look at Gregor, I see a man who has finally figured it all out and ceased taking life so seriously. CT-5385 Tup was a replacement fighter for the 501st Legion. He would join the unit right around the Battle of Umbara, widely seen as one of the worst campaigns for any clone to fight in during the war. And on that first mission, Tup would see dozens of his comrades march directly into laser fire. He witnessed a Jedi General betray his troops, setting up one of the worst blue-on-blue incidents in JR history. And then he partook in a mutiny in which one member of his unit actually executes their Jedi General. That's one heck of a first mission, and I guess that's why Tup's appearance is so interesting as well. He has slicked back black hair, and it's almost reminiscent of wise guys from the Prohibition era. On top of that, the tattoo, the single tear beneath the eye, in the real world is associated with either sorrow, served time, and most infamously, the murder of another person. I think the slick back black hair, along with that eye tattoo, is supposed to paint Tup as sort of a criminal type, which of course foreshadows his future. Tup will eventually murder Jedi General Tiplar, and even though it's the inhibitor chips that set him off, from everyone else's perspective, this just looked like a cold gangland murder, execution style. CT-5555, or Fives, is one of the most famous troopers in the 501st Legion. He started off his career pretty complacent as part of Domino Squad, a unit that historically underperformed in all of their training sessions. But it was clear once Fives was deployed to his first mission on Rishi Moon that he was a very courageous and bold individual. Fives would distinguish himself during the Battle of Camino, where he would also be promoted to Arc Trooper. Fives would also survive the suicide mission to the Citadel, and during the Battle of Umbara, he would disobey General Ponkrell and lead an assault on the Separatist fleet using stolen Umbaran starfighters. Very, very bold actions. Actions that would go on to save countless clones in the theater. And then finally, we all know about Fives' role in the inhibitor chip conspiracy after Tup shoots Master Tiplar. Fives would do everything possible to save his friend, and after Tup's death, he would try his best to figure out what was going on. Eventually, Fives almost uncovers the plot for Order 66 and reveals it to both the Jedi and the clones. And so, what feature on Fives' face distinguishes him? Well, honestly, not that much, but he does have pretty bold eyebrows and a very strong goatee, which really does suit him well. It makes him look very bold, which is a great way to describe him. And then he also has that 5 tattooed onto his head, just in case he forgets that his name is Fives and that his call sign is Fives as well. I guess this represents Fives' tenacity and unwillingness to stop doing what he's doing. Lastly, we have Clone Commander Mayday, whose experiences in the war have probably worn him down more than most. At one point in time, this Clone Commander would have been in charge of an entire legion, thousands of men. But when we run into him on that remote outpost on Barton 4, he only has 2 clone troopers left. Commander Mayday is wary. His beard has grown out way beyond regulation. His hair is overgrown and slicked back so that he can still see clearly. His armor is faded and disheveled. It's very clear that he's wrapped fabric around the joints and other areas to increase his body temperature, almost like a homeless person stuffing newspapers into their coat. Seeing someone like Commander Mayday in the state that he is extremely tragic, especially because he tries his best to continue the mission. He even carries a tiny little hammer that he uses to deactivate landmines. It's a small battlefield improvisation that he made, most likely because he was given inadequate equipment for this mission. Ultimately, it was Commander Mayday's unnecessary death that broke Crosshair and made him turn against the Empire. Perhaps Mayday's appearance in his shoddy armor and poor supplies also played a role. Crosshair was no fan of the Regs, and on multiple occasions he said so and even brawled with them. But I think seeing these once proud clones in such a poor state made him realize just what the Empire was about.
Help him.
Certainly not. That would be a waste of the Empire's resources.
He'll die.
And so next time you guys see a clone, you should probably judge them by their physical appearance, by how they wear their hair, what color it is, by how many tattoos they have, especially on their face, what color is their armor, what things have they drawn onto their armor. These are all very important things because remember, these clones all look 100% like each other, and I think it's very much in human nature for them to kind of go out and find their own identity and try and look different so that everyone doesn't just think that they're copy and pasted. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.